Right, Pete. Great that
Well,
you could
great to
come
see you,
today
John.
and have this meeting and
Pleasure.
talk about this very important topic. I'm really delighted you could come. So I'd like to kick off really with you just introducing a bit about yourself and what you're up to and what you've done. But I know that could take at least 10 minutes. But if we could get a synopsis for a few minutes, that would be great.
Sure. Well, basically, of course, we came across each other a couple of decades ago now.
That's
But
right.
my background is I trained as an economist, and I spent most of my working life in logistics. Although, when you think about the companies I work for, that's not immediately apparent. But clearly, the current subject matter is relevant to my 25 years in the waste industry, and that's principally for 20 years, almost as a director at Biffa. And it was whilst I was working in the waste industry that I realised that apart from it being about logistics, that in fact it was the tip of the iceberg when it came to all these issues around the so-called resource efficiency agenda, the amount that we're throwing away, the circular economy, the resource use economy, and of course all the baggage that goes with that in terms of CO2 emissions, which is one small part of the problem. Now, having retired from Biffa 3 years ago as a result of an agreed takeover bid from a venture capital company, I thought that was it, but basically the phone started ringing. So in the public sector, I'm Boris Johnson's nominated expert, if you like. I don't like the word expert, but still, nominee on the London Waste and Recycling Board, and giving input on technological and economic issues. I've also been involved with the now disbanded Advantage West Midlands working group, which has been looking at the placement of strategic, usually quite large, resource recovery centres, particularly around issues of planning. I'm a non-exec director of a number of waste technological companies, ranging from anaerobic digestion companies that are in the biotreatment sector, right the way through to so-called plasma gasification, and no doubt we'll be talking about different technologies, but these are high temperature oxygen starved systems. I'm involved with involved with transport logistics with a London-based company that's heavily involved in recycling, and I'm an advisor to a number of financial institutions, notably a large French bank that's interested in sale and leaseback arrangements on big resource recovery parks, and also with a company called Climate Change Capital, which, as its name suggests, is heavily committed to low carbon investments in the environmental space. That's not only about waste, it's also about photovoltaics, renewable energy, and in all its forms, and indeed low emission housing stock and so on.
Great. That's really helpful, Pete. What I'd like to do now is get a sense of really the general issue that we're facing globally, really, on waste and resource use, really, and not resource waste. So, just a global overview, if you like, because I know you're capable of doing that. You've got a very good helicopter mind which can go up and down very well.
Well, clearly my expertise base is in a UK context, and but since then, I've got involved in a number of takes on this from literally a global issue. But I think that if asked to identify the key drivers, I'd say that it's the fact that we're on a metaphorical spaceship, and that spaceship has finite resources, both in terms of quantity, quality, in terms of biodiversity, in terms of minerals and inorganic materials, aggregates and so on. So I think that for the first time maybe since Malthus sort of registered this issue in relation to population and food supply in the 19th century, we are now at one of those crunch points. So clearly those crunch points are about the supply of materials, and in part to feed an ever-rising population. And then the other side of the coin is that as those materials are consumed, and they're getting scarcer and scarcer, as they're consumed, then in the conversion process to provide benefit for our species, then you've got these output factors like carbon dioxide, sea pollution, litter, marine degradation, species loss, and so on. And this input-output approach I really found quite useful when I, in the early noughties, well, really late 90s, started getting interested in the work that was coming out of the Wuppertal Institute on resource consumption and production. In terms of the specifics of the issues or the solutions, well, a global population is rising in net terms at around 80 million a year, so ballpark 1.5 million a week. Behind that, though, I think the bigger figure that is more concerning is the estimated 300 million people a year that are joining what I call the global bourgeoisie, the middle classes.
Yeah.
And it's middle class consumption that's the problem. I think most of those net additions in population, and for better or for worse, are going to be working in low environmental impact areas where unfortunately life expectancy is low and they're at subsistence level. But the real boot to consumption and indeed parallel emissions is coming from the rising middle classes in South America, in India and in China. I reckon the figures I've seen suggest around 250, 300 million people every year, equivalent to the entire population of the original EU6. So, we're talking big numbers here with big global footprints.
Great. I think we'll pause there because it's given us a nice introduction and you kept perfectly to the 7 minutes
Great.
limit. So I'm going to turn that off, hopefully.